LA Kings fans continue to chime in about off-season moves and more on another fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also co-host of Locked On NHL Game Night, a daily podcast and YouTube show, wrapping up the night in the NHL, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. It is time for another Kings fan feedback show, your chance to critique, praise, complain, question, celebrate, and pontificate about our Los Angeles Kings. We've got a lot of emails to get to, which is a great problem to have, especially in the offseason. So let's get right into it. And we start with Ryan in Parts Unknown. He says, "Hey, Eddie, first, I really love your show." Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for putting it out for us fans. Second, I wanted to ask how it felt to win the Cup in 2014. I'm a newer Kings fan, so I was too young to really remember what it was like to win it all in 2014. I'd love to hear how you felt and what your reaction was. And that was Ryan in Parts Unknown. Now, Ryan sent this email in 4 days ago, but it was very appropriate for today when we're recording this show, June the 13th, because it is the 11th year anniversary of the Kings winning their second Stanley Cup title in 2014. As for how did I feel? Well, obviously I felt great, but I've said this many times before. To me, the second Cup title was more thrilling than the first. And some people think I'm crazy about that, but of course the first time is always going to be special. And as a Kings fan, I legitimately wondered if they would ever win the Stanley Cup. Like, I really had a fear that that may never happen. So the first time was amazing, but the second time I thought was harder. In 2012, obviously, when they knocked off Vancouver, the President's Trophy winners for the first round, that was huge. But then they went on, they beat Arizona. And then the conference finals, that was the conference finals. In the finals, the New Jersey Devils weren't the New Jersey Devils that had won multiple cups. So it was still great, but it wasn't as great to me as 2014 when you had the reverse sweep of the Sharks. You beat the Ducks in Game 7 in Anaheim, the only playoff matchup between the two SoCal teams. And then you beat the defending Stanley Cup champs in a Game 7 in Chicago, which was the most thrilling win for me in Kings history. And then the final against the Rangers, 3 of the 5 games went overtime. 2 of them went double overtime. So to me, 2014 was the more exciting of the two. And I also think winning 2 in 3 years, I thought it validated the Kings as a legit championship team. It's never easy to win a cup, but, a team can have a Cinderella kind of remarkable, it all came together in the playoffs at the right time and win a title. But when you win 2 in 3 years, that's not a fluke. They can't say, oh, they just got hot and the goalie, Jonathan Quick was great for one postseason or whatever. I just thought it was a harder road. All the Game 7 road wins, you beat the Ducks, the reverse sweep, and then 2 in 3 years. I don't know. I thought 2014 was the more enjoyable for me of the Kings' 2 Stanley Cup titles. Rick, apparently a neighbor of mine here in San Pedro, said, "Hey, Eddie, longtime LA Kings fan here. Discovered your great podcast a couple months ago, and I listen regularly. You are awesome, and most of your views mimic mine, LOL. Was surprised to hear that you live in San Pedro, as I do. These days I live in the Holy Trinity area, a few blocks east of First and Western. Anyway, wanted to say hi. Maybe we should meet at Churi Man for a breakfast burrito one day." And that was from Rick down the street from me in San Pedro. I will say I've heard amazing things about the Churi Man breakfast burrito. I'm embarrassed to say I have not yet had one. Breakfast burritos are one of my most favorite dishes on the earth, food dishes. So yes, I would love to enjoy a breakfast burrito with you one of these days. You are the second San Pedron that I know listens to the show. Rick and Rich. Rich is the other one who I've yet to meet up with him either. Maybe we should all meet up together. I know Rich is said to meet up at Busy Bee for a sandwich, which I have had Busy Bee sandwiches. So yes, good to hear from you, Rick. I'm glad you're a local neighbor here of mine, and I would definitely like to enjoy a breakfast burrito with you someday. All right, Philip from Parts Unknown, and he titled it Philip from Parts Unknown. He didn't just not include where he was from, so he likes that apparently. Philip said, I read that Tanner Jeannot will be looking for more ice time and will unlikely to be signing with the Kings. If that's the case, who will our fighter be? The team did take steps to be tougher, but without him, I don't see a guy who seems regularly willing to drop the gloves. Is there anybody in free agency we could get? Thank you. Again, that was Philip in Parts Unknown. I did not see the details on Tanner Jeannot that you have seen. Maybe that was another podcast that you heard it on. I don't know. So we'll see if he comes back or not. If Tanner Jeannot does not want to resign with the Kings, then Samuel Hellenius can do some of that. He's willing to do some of that. But there's no doubt Tanner Jeannot was the best player we had to fill that kind of a role. And he was also a pretty decent player. I wonder if this maybe could open a bit of a window for Jeff Malott, who filled in for Tanner Jeannot late in the year. He was certainly willing to drop the gloves. I know his brother is like an MMA fighter or something. I just don't know if he has the same skill set to be able to also contribute, because you can't have those guys anymore that don't also contribute something, that are just the fighters. So I don't know. Maybe Jeff Malott could get an opportunity. There was a guy named Matthew Olivier for the Columbus Blue Jackets who was going to be a UFA, and he led the NHL in fighting majors last year, but he got scooped up. Columbus re-signed him. And the Edmonton Oilers, they got a guy, Trent Frederick, who's kind of a Tanner Jeannot type, but everything I've read is that he's going to re-sign with the Oilers as well once the season comes to an end. So I don't know that there's anybody out there who kind of jumps off the page as being able to fit the bill if, in fact, Tanner Jeannot does not return. Brian in Tampa checks in. He says, there isn't much to talk about right now, so I thought I would pass on this completely useless information. Here are some of the meanings of the last names of Kings players. Okay. Kopitar means resembling a horse in Slovenian, which is fitting. Wow. Kevin Fiala is from Switzerland. His family is Czech. Fiala is the Czech word for wild carnation flower. These types of names usually come from the symbol on the family banner. Vogel comes from the modern German word Vogel, which means bird. Dowdy is an Old English word meaning brave or strong. Hellenius means son of Helena. Saint Helena was a major influence in introducing Christianity to Finland. Kemper is an older version of German, which means companion or friend. Kuzmenko translates as son of autumn in Ukrainian. Leferrier means the iron worker in French. Kempe translates to champion. Turcotte means little Turk in French. Mikey Anderson and Joel Edmondson are obviously sons of Anders, or son of Anders and son of Edmund. Moverara means one who moves or travels. Byfield is the name of a village in England, also translates to place by the open country. Jeannot means little John in French, and Clark means clerk, which was a religious secretary or scholar in medieval times. The word cleric for a religious healer comes from the same word. Some very interesting tidbits from Brian in Tampa. I don't think that was useless information, Brian. At least it was interesting and entertaining. So I think that is useful. Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. It does kind of remind me a little bit that I was thinking about doing a show that I've done in radio and other podcasts I've been on that talk about useless information. I've done shows, and I've always enjoyed doing it, where the audience asks the host any question they want, and preferably some fun stuff, and preferably non-hockey related stuff, although you can ask hockey stuff if you want. But just a show where it's nothing but questions for me about anything, and it's kind of fun, and you get to know my personality a little bit better. I enjoy doing it, and I've enjoyed other people doing it. So maybe that's something we do once we get deep in the offseason, after the draft, after free agency. Maybe we give that a try here on Locked On LA Kings. All right, we got a lot more emails coming up, and no more emails about what last names mean, although I thought that was interesting. We'll talk about some more emails. Offseason moves. People have a lot of ideas. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. The NBA Finals are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and during live play with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up at the biggest moments, and how could tracking their trends help you build your next big bet? What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds? If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with the same game parlay? How could a $200 in bonus bet add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Scott in Simi Valley checking in. He says, thanks for the comments from Marchand about the disadvantage high-cost teams have in signing free agents. It's true. The Kings start the process in a hole compared to a team like Florida. I don't know how the NHL fixes that, but it needs fixing. Maybe a prorated league-wide cap pool would do it, but who would do the figuring and how? As for Brad Marchand, he's perhaps a risk worth taking even at the reported asking price. It's going to take a pretty big culture shakeup for the Kings to get past the Oilers, and honestly, he's a miserable prick to play against. Can I say that on the podcast? I was quoting someone. On top of that, he's quite a hockey player, and we can all clearly see right now. Signing Marchand by offering a bit more money would be a gamble, but less so than the PLD signing was, that's for sure. Another hurdle for the Kings is that signing a Marchand caliber type of player is that they want to win. Would a Sam Bennett or Brad Marchand be confident that Jim Hiller would deliver the coaching goods in the playoffs? I think they'd be about as confident as you and I are, so I guess the rest of the email this week is a moot point because there's no way in heck they'd sign here with this coaching staff. Thanks, Eddie, for keeping us fans so well informed, but sometimes knowing too much is depressing. LOL. That was Scott in Simi Valley. Well, I know, Scott, I am certainly not smart enough to know how the NHL would go about fixing that issue if they wanted to fix it, which apparently they don't. So it's kind of not something worth worrying about at this point because, like I said, the NHL has shown no desire to fix this supposed problem. If you think it's a problem. And I think, looking at Marchand, looking at Sam Bennett, I think they're a little bit different situations. I think Marchand is at the end of his career. I think he does want to stay on a competitive team. For Sam Bennett, though, I don't think he cares about the coaching staff at all. I think he wants to get the biggest contract he can get because he's never going to be in this position again. And if the Panthers go on to win the cup, I mean, he's won 2 cups. It's now about taking care of him and his family. So I think Sam Bennett is about the money, and he should be. I think Brad Marchand he's made his money. He might be looking to stay with a team like Florida that is going to have another chance of winning a cup soon. Jim in Janesville, he says, formerly West Hills, says, happy days to all. The finals are certainly highlighting what grit means. I hope Holland takes note. The Kings need players who want to win as bad as Jonathan Quick. That guy hated to lose and would do everything he could to help his team win. Every player wants to win, but you got to really hate losing. I've listened to free agent debates ad nauseum, and I haven't really heard the coach factor. It's difficult to imagine a top player thinking that they really want to play for Jim Hiller. I'm sure he's respected all throughout the league, but a dynamic coach, I don't think so. Not yet. Time will tell, but it isn't always about the money. Keep cool. And that is Jim in Janesville. Well, Jim, it has been my experience as someone who's covered professional athletes for many years that it mostly is about the money. Now, not always, but 98% of the time, I would say it is about the money. And I think if Sam Bennett gets enough zeros that he wouldn't care who was coaching the team. I will agree with you about Jonathan Quick. He was the most competitive Kings player I have ever been around. The only time I ever saw him without his game face on was when he had a different kind of face on at the Kings victory celebrations when he was S-faced. But no, if you give them enough money, they'll come to the Kings. Robert Mueller is from Parts Unknown. He says, hey, Eddie, love your program. Thank you, Robert. This is the reason why I don't think the Kings should go after Mitch Marner. Yes, I've heard from Elliot Friedman that Marner is most interested in signing with either the Kings or Vegas. But to get Marner at $13.5 million, the Kings probably would not be able to re-sign 3 of the following players: Tanner Jeannot, who the Kings need because they need toughness. Andre Kuzmenko, a right shot forward, and someone we need that fits with the Kings. Alex Laferriere, another need right shot, and Vladislav Gavrikov. The Kings' playoff problem of not being deep enough would be exasperated. I suggest they re-sign Kuzmenko for around $5 million. Laferriere, a $4 million bridge deal. Try to sign free agent Brock Besser for $8.5 million. Re-sign Jeannot at $3 million. And instead of re-signing Gavrikov, try to trade Trevor Moore. Yeah, that would hurt. And a second-round pick to the Rangers for restricted free agent left shot defenseman Keandre Miller and sign him for around $6 million a year. If you check Miller's and Gavrikov's stats over the last 4 years, they are nearly identical, with Miller offering a bit more offense and Gavrikov a bit more defense. They both have good size. Miller's 6'5", Gavrikov 6'3", but Miller is 4 years younger than Gavrikov, whose numbers will only decline from here on out. I would feel much better offering a 7-year contract to Miller than a 6-year contract to Gavrikov. I think it would have to be an 8-year contract to Gavrikov. The Kings would be about $1 million under the cap, have 3 right shot wingers and a younger lefty, and Besser would offer more offense than Trevor Moore and is 2 years younger. What do you think? And that was Robert Mueller in parts unknown. Robert, I think it's well thought out. I'm not a huge Keandre Miller fan, but what you're saying makes sense. Get a cheaper, younger replacement. That maybe is a step down, but you're improving in other areas. I think the only thing that maybe kind of jumps out at me a bit is you're having Kuzmenko, I guess, replace Trevor Moore because Brock Besser would play up in the top 6. And I don't know that Kuzmenko, I don't know that he can give you the numbers you want from him if he's not playing in the top 6. I could be wrong, but I would say I don't have a big issue with what you're proposing. The Kings would be better up front, but a little weaker on the back end. So Human in Palos Verdes says, happy Friday the 13th and the 11-year anniversary of the last time the Kings won a playoff series. It's been a while since I've emailed, but I've tuned in every day. Thanks for keeping us engaged over the offseason. Thank you for continuing to listen. He says, couple of things. Number one, just my thoughts on you rooting against the Oilers in the finals. I honestly totally disagree. Trust me, I hate the Oilers with all my heart, but I feel that, number one, it would feel better if the Kings had lost the eventual cup winner. And number two, it makes the Western Conference appear a bit stronger. Like, come on, if the Oilers are going to stomp all over the West like that, at least go win the cup. And third, the Oilers finally breaking through will even slightly lower their and McDrysidle's, I guess, accommodated sense of urgency to win the cup, hopefully leaving room for the Kings to finally break through against them in coming years. Number two, on to Marner, Ehlers, and other big-name UFAs. I don't think these guys are the answer. I think it is of far more importance to bring back guys like Kuzmenko and Gavrikov, who have proven to be meaningful contributors to the Kings system and at a much better price, whereas bringing in a new player like Marner still really has no guarantee of improving the team and would mean sacrificing Kuzi and Gabby in the offseason. But that said, I totally agree with you that it is fun to see the Kings dabble in big free agents, and I would still be undeniably excited if we got Marner. If I were Ken Holland, I would keep Kuzi, Gabby, and move guys like Moore, Jeannot, and Turks, and honestly focus more on refining the bottom 6. Last but not least, can't wait to see Clark and Byfield be absolute monsters next year. Please. Hope all is well, and thanks again for the show. And that was Human in Palos Verdes. Look, obviously you can feel that way about the Oilers potentially winning if you want. We had a listener last week who felt the same way. I cannot be rooting for the Oilers to win. I want to experience some major schadenfreude with the Oilers, which is taking pleasure in the misery of others. So yeah, I will be delighted as if I can see Connor McDavid crying after another game 7. So loss. So not enjoy. So yeah, I am absolutely rooting against the Oilers. I hope they fail miserably. But they're looking pretty good. You say that big name UFAs aren't the answer. But I mean, you look at McDavid and Draisaitl, I've said it before, they're not going anywhere. And I think the Kings need some big guns to try and compete with them. You're never going to get a player as good as those guys, most likely, but I think the Kings need to try and get some stronger, more dangerous, high-end talent to try and compete with them. And obviously, we hope that Quentin Byfield and Brandt Clark eventually turn in to special players. But I think the Kings need more weapons than what they have right now to compete with the Oilers. We're still got plenty of emails to go. Hopefully, we can get them all in. We will try that next. Our Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You just realized your business needs to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page to help you reach the right candidates faster. If you've been in that spot where you need to hire right away, the pressure's on, and every day without the right person's a setback, that's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They'll make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. And now, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. More emails. Let's get to Dave in Long Beach. He says, following up on my last email, you said you doubted Marner would get 90 points if he joined the Kings. I look back at when Marcel Dionne joined the Kings. The year before he came here, the top scorer was Bob Nevin with 72 points. In 75-76, Dionne scored 94 points, which was 21 points more than the number 2 player, Butch Goring. The following year, Marcel scored 122 points, almost 40 points more than the second top scorer. I'm not saying Marner will ever score that many points, but I just wanted to call out, if a top scorer comes to LA, they could get into the mid-90s. We need someone that can score like that. It would mean that opposing teams would have another player that they'd have to focus on, perhaps opening up other Kings players to score more. And go Kings go. That was from Dave in Long Beach. Now, Dave, maybe you've been around long enough. I never saw Marcel Dionne play. Certainly a different style of play back in the 70s when Dionne was with the Kings. All I know is what the Kings play like now. And they haven't had 100-point player since Gretzky in the early to mid 90s. So, and no one's even come close to it, I don't believe, in the last 20 years. So it's just not the style of play the Kings have, especially lately, that's conducive to having a player score close to 100 points. So if it happens, I'll be thrilled to see it, but I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think if Mitch Marner comes to the Kings that he's going to score. I don't think he'll score in the 90s. I really don't. I think he'd score probably in the 80s somewhere, but that would still be pretty good. That would be the leading scorer on the Kings for sure. Brian in Los Alamitos checking in. He says, with the draft just a few weeks away, who are the biggest draft busts in Kings history? The consensus is probably Thomas Hickey, but to me, it was a player named Pavel Rosa, drafted in 1995. He had an incredible junior career where he scored 152 points in 68 games. I thought he was going to be something really special for the Kings, but turned out he was a total dud. Dishonorable mentions include Jonathan Bernier, Olli Jokinen, Aki Berg, and Jamie Storr. And did you know the Kings had a first overall draft pick in the 1967 amateur draft? It was defenseman Rick Pagnutti. He was an expansion year, or it was an expansion year, and expansion teams were allowed to draft first, and the Kings had the first overall pick. I've been a Kings fan since 1991, and I never knew this. Is this common knowledge amongst Kings fans? Thanks for all your hard work and another great week of shows. Go Kings go. Brian in Los Alamitos. Yeah, I would doubt that is common knowledge. As far as I'm concerned, I don't count that as the Kings ever having the number 1 overall pick. That might sound a little weird, but because it was an expansion draft, I don't know that to me, it's a kind of a different category for me. In the modern draft, the Kings have never had the number 1 overall pick. They've had 3 number 2 overall picks, Drew Doughty, Jimmy Carson, and was it Rick Smith? I think it was. But as far as the Doug Smith, as far as the worst picks in Kings history, the first name that came to mind was Colton Tubert. He was the 13th overall pick in 2008, and most people forget about him because Drew Doughty was the second pick. But Tubert only played 24 NHL games. He was a defenseman. The Kings could have picked Erik Karlsson, who ended up being selected 2 picks later. Pavel Rosa, you mentioned, he was a second-round pick. So I get what you're saying as far as his incredible numbers in juniors, but I don't think a second-round pick can be the worst pick in Kings history. A couple of ones I looked up. How about Jens Karlsson? He was the 18th overall pick in 2001, never played an NHL game. Even worse, Lauri Tukkonen, 11th overall pick in 2004. He played only 5 NHL games. And then there was somebody named Matt Zoltek. He was the 15th overall pick in 1997, never played an NHL game. And he was taken 12 picks after the Kings took Olli Jokinen at number 2. And And you mentioned some of the names you mentioned. I mean, I don't think those guys were terrible picks. Thomas Hickey, Jokinen, Jonathan Bernier, who was at Jamie Storr. Those guys all went on to play a significant number of NHL games. So, I mean, like Jokinen didn't work out for the Kings, but he went elsewhere and became a really good NHL player. So I don't know. I don't think those picks were necessarily terrible. I would say, like I said, Colton Tubert or probably Lauri Tukkonen, 11th overall, and you play 5 NHL games. That's pretty bad. Kevin from Bellingham, Washington, formerly Torrance, California, says, I'm a long-time everydayer and a first-time caller. I like that. First of all, I wanted to say big thanks to you for all the work you do. Appreciate it. Secondly, I'd like to thank my fellow Kings fans. After traveling back home to be there for Game 2 against the Oilers, you guys did not disappoint. What an atmosphere. I can still hear the Skinner ringing in the back of my head. I think we as diehard Kings fans have an idea on the direction we'd like to see the franchise take in terms of squad, style of play, and ambition. Despite Jim Hiller seemingly not taking accountability for his mistakes after the loss to the Oilers, maybe he just about earned a second chance, maybe, to give it a go once again. I'm, of course, not there behind closed doors. I can only hope that he will prove that he did, in fact, recognize his mistakes, at which point he can begin to learn from. My question to you, Eddie, is if you woke up tomorrow morning and you were Ken Holland, what would your to-do list this summer be for the Kings? What would be the fate of Hiller under your reign? Do you take a big swing at a star free agent like Mitch Marner? Do you sign Gavrikov and Kuzmenko? Do you maybe see Deneau or Spence as trade pieces to get a true number one left shot defenseman if Gavrikov goes? I'm sure there are plenty more potential GM forks in the road scenarios that aren't coming to mind as well. Thanks for taking the time to read and keep up the great work. Go Kings, go. Kevin in Bellingham, Washington. The problem with me trying to answer that question is that I have no idea what the players are asking for. Ken Holland does. So it's difficult for me to answer the question if I would resign Vladislav Gavrikov when I don't know exactly what he's asking for. Would I go after Mitch Marner? Does he even want to come here? So there are a lot of questions that I can't answer. I will say this, probably my first move would be get a better coach, which I know is harsh. And Connor Doyle, who we had in an interview the other day, said, the Kings changing coaches, 3 coaches in 3 years or whatever it would be, something like that, seems a little scattered. But new GM, I want my coach. I think there's better coaches out there available. That would probably be my first move. I would probably re-sign Gavrikov, and I would go hard after Brock Besser. So I think those would probably be my big moves. DL in North Hollywood says, every day are here. Thank you, DL. Says, I don't believe the team has filled their coaching option in Ontario yet since Marco Sturm was hired away by the Boston Bruins. They have not. If not, then I have a suggestion. It is someone who has already coached Ontario, John Warbluski. I watched him closely in the 1 1/3 seasons he coached for us before leaving suddenly for a never specified reason. He was that extremely rare coach who somehow knew how to coach and inspire players and be more creative and offensively dynamic. Whatever reason he had to leave so suddenly, it was clearly not anything harmful, abusive, or illegal, or he wouldn't have been hired to coach the women's Olympic team about a year and a half later. I say, let's bring him back. If not as a head coach, then an assistant or even a special offensive coach like we see in basketball. Anyway, Kings fans and management always say they want to get more offensive out of the team or more offense out of the team. Well, in my opinion, this coach has a special ability to bring out offensive players. He wouldn't cost the team all that much in salary. I think bring back John Warbluski. This is DL in North Hollywood. That is out of nowhere. I have to admit that I've never heard of John Warbluski before, and I actually kind of wondered if this was like a prank email, but nope. I looked him up, and sure enough, just as DL said, he was the coach of the Ontario Reign back in 2020 for a couple seasons, and he is now currently the coach of the U.S. women's national team. So he's not a name I'm familiar with, so I will take your word for it, DL, that John Warbluski should be the next head coach of the Ontario Reign. Our final email comes from Ed in Brea. Says, congrats to Anze Kopitar for the Lady Byng win. This week is the anniversary of the Kings' 2 Stanley Cup wins. 2014 is more special to me as it was more dynamic and it put us ahead of the Ducks in Cup wins. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Correction. I think he's saying correct me if I'm wrong right now, or I just can't read. Alec Martinez will have a special place in my memory since he is the only player in NHL history to have series-clinching goals in overtime for a conference and Stanley Cup final. Go Kings, go always. That was Ed in Brea. Yes, I'm pretty sure you're correct, Ed, that Alec Martinez is the only player to have scored clinching series overtime wins in both the conference finals, which he did against the Blackhawks, and the Stanley Cup finals, which he did in double overtime against the New York Rangers. Robert in Hawthorne, I'm sorry we did not get to your email. He asked about maybe grading the Kings players. That's maybe something we'll do an episode of at some point from the past season. But I want to say thank you to everyone who took the time to email this week. As I always say every week, this show is literally not possible without your participation. If you are an everydayer and you listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, I invite you to check out Locked On NHL Game Night, a show that I help co-host every night after the Stanley Cup Finals. If you want to get an email in for a future fan feedback show, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. Always feel free to leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. And please stay interactive with the show by following us on Twitter, Instagram, X, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.